My name is Keith Pafford, and this is my informative speech for public speaking at Thomas Edison State College. How would most of us feel about navigating a canoe across an ocean? 5,000 years ago, the Polynesians began searching for lands in the Pacific Ocean. Many of them navigated thousands of miles in their small double canoes, using only their knowledge of wind, weather, stars, birds, and sea currents. These navigators held high status for their abilities in terms of trade, as well as evacuating people to neighboring islands. Today, the art of old navigation is becoming lost, and many of us take for granted the ease with which we travel. In the 1970s, GPS was created in order to overcome limitations of previous navigation systems. Since then, its use has become vital in the transportation of food, people, supplies, and even ideas. My goal in this speech is to provide an introduction to the history of navigation, as well as a little bit about how the GPS system operates, as well as the functions that it serves. 17 years ago, I met a flight training student who worked for a company called Garmin. He used to rave about what a great company it was, and he introduced me to a device called a GPS. He pointed out how it displayed landmarks and also calculated flight planning computations. I was intrigued, but remember thinking that it could take years or even generations for this GPS to catch on. Today, these GPS receivers are in many common items, such as watches, cell phones, computers, and sometimes animals. Looking back at human history, it's well known that stars were important navigational tools. Early navigators could determine their position or latitude using the angle of the sun at its highest point in the sky. But to determine their position east or west, it was important for those navigators to have an accurate time standard. In the 1700s, marine chronometers were developed, which did exactly that. Sailors could preset these clocks when leaving a known location, and then compare that time throughout their voyage to the current time as indicated by the sun or stars. In the 1830s, the U.S. Naval Observatory was created and assigned the duty of calibrating these chronometers. In the early 1900s, electronic forms of navigation began being used in aircraft. And this instrumentation contained a needle which pointed at a radio station antenna. And it worked well, except that it failed to tell the navigator how far they were from the station, and it wasn't always precise. In World War II, LORAN, or Long-Range Aid to Navigation, used multiple ground stations in order to triangulate the user's position. In 1960, the U.S. Navy created the world's first satellite navigation system. This system, called Transit, was used for submarines and provided position information once every 90 minutes. The first group of GPS satellites were launched in 1978. GPS has a full name of Navstar GPS, which stands for Navigation System Using Timing and Range. It's owned and operated by the U.S. Air Force and is headquartered in Colorado Springs. In order to operate, Navstar consists of three segments: the space segment, the control segment, and the user segment. The space segment consists of a constellation of 24 satellites which orbit above the Earth 12,000 miles above us. Also in this system are numerous backup satellites that are already in orbit and can be commissioned at any time as necessary. The satellites are powered by solar panels and have backup batteries in the event of an eclipse. They have rocket boosters which are able to control the orbital altitude, as well as atomic clocks which give them precise timing information. The satellites also contain nuclear detection systems, which provide an early advance for an attack, as well as a heads up on who may be monitoring nuclear systems. The control segment consists of a series of ground stations and antennas which allow the Air Force to analyze, perform maintenance, and control the satellites. Also in this segment is the U.S. Naval Observatory, which to this day is still the nation's official timekeeper. The third and final segment is the user segment, which consists of the receiver, which tracks the satellite. During the Cold War, concerns over U.S. control over GPS led the Russians to develop their own system. And in 1983, also during the Cold War, Korean Air Flight 007 strayed off the course, went into Russian territory, and was shot down. This led the U.S. government to make Navstar available for public use. Russia's current system, called GLONASS, or Global Navigation Satellite System, reached full global coverage in 2011, and it's now also available for public use. So anyone on Earth with a receiver is able to use these services at no charge to the user. GLONASS and Navstar operate on separate frequencies. However, some receivers are able to track both GLONASS and Navstar. This allows the receiver to track more satellites, which increases accuracy and reduces the chances of service interruptions. As well as their use as navigational tools, GPS also provides important positioning information, as well as timing and synchronization functions. In terms of positioning, I'm going to mention that the ground stations and the satellites don't track, monitor, or spy on anybody. There are now laws within the United States that prohibit the use of GPS tracking of an individual without that individual's permission. There's companies that offer those services in order to keep track of devices such as cell phones, tablet computers, cars, or even loved ones. GPS bracelets can keep track of Alzheimer's or dementia patients within a few feet. GPS positioning abilities also help surveyors create maps, and it helps companies track and provide assistance to employees. And authorities can track stolen products such as cars. Rail systems can use GPS to position their trains to increase accuracy as well as safety. And agriculture also uses GPS, and that it very precisely lines up crop dusters as well as tractors. Scientists can use GPS to monitor forest fires, oil spills, migratory birds, endangered species, and even measure wave height. And in the future, GPS satellites are going to incorporate search and rescue transponders, which will enable precise, worldwide, instantaneous notification of individuals or vehicles such as boats or aircraft, which may be in distress. As for timing and synchronization, GPS helps timestamp and verify financial transactions. It synchronizes ATM networks. Power and utility companies use GPS to control the frequency of their power distribution. And telephone networks that are wireless can use it to keep base stations in sync. This allows mobile device users to have a more efficient radio spectrum. And even Hollywood studios can use GPS in order to keep their audio and video data in sync. In summary, I've pointed out that GPS has a full name of Navstar GPS. It's owned and operated by the U.S. Air Force. And as well as just the satellites, there's also a series of ground stations which are used to analyze, perform maintenance, and control of satellites. Another satellite navigation system currently available is called GLONASS, which is owned by Russia. And receivers that are compatible with both GLONASS and Navstar will have more accuracy and less service interruptions. I've also pointed out that there are many applications aside from navigation that GPS helps with. And that's from scientific research to the positioning of trains to the timing and synchronization of utility stations. I hope when you think of GPS in the future, you now have a better understanding of how the system operates, as well as its importance to society. For thousands of years, humans have searched for accurate and reliable means of navigation, and GPS is now an important part of information age life. Those with the luxury of using it, Navstar GPS will be beneficial for ages to come.